The late afternoon sun was beginning to set when Lisa Chen pulled her old Honda into the parking lot of the Grand Wellington Hotel. She turned off the engine and sat there for a moment, looking down at her clothes. Paint stains covered her faded jeans and her sweater had seen better days. Her sneakers were scuffed and dirty from kneeling on the floor all day. She sighed, knowing she looked like she'd been through a war zone. But there hadn't been time to go home and change. Lisa had spent the entire day at the Riverside Community Center, working with kids from low-income families. They were preparing for an art show, and the children had been so excited that paint had ended up everywhere, including all over her. She smiled, thinking about little Tommy's face when he finally got his painting just right, or how Maria had hugged her so tight when she praised her work. But now she had a job to do. The foundation she managed was planning their annual charity gala, and the board had specifically requested she check out the Grand Wellington. They wanted somewhere impressive, somewhere that would attract the kind of donors who could write big checks. Lisa personally thought it was too fancy, too showy. But the board insisted that appearances mattered in the world of fundraising. She grabbed her worn leather bag from the passenger seat and headed toward the hotel entrance. The building was stunning, all glass and marble with a fountain out front that probably cost more than most people made in a year. A doorman in a pristine uniform stood at the entrance, but as Lisa approached, he seemed to look right through her, his nose wrinkling slightly. The lobby took her breath away. Crystal chandeliers hung from the ceiling, and the floors were so polished she could see her reflection. Everything gleamed. Everything was perfect. And suddenly Lisa felt very out of place. She walked up to the front desk where a tall man in an expensive suit was reviewing some papers. His name tag read Richard Thornton, Guest Relations Manager. He looked up as she approached, and she watched his expression change from professional courtesy to barely concealed disdain in about 2 seconds. "Can I help you?" he asked, his tone suggesting that helping her was the last thing he wanted to do. "Yes, hello," Lisa said, trying to sound confident despite feeling increasingly uncomfortable. "I'm here to inquire about booking your ballroom for an event. A charity gala, actually. We're looking at dates in about 3 months. Richard's eyes traveled slowly from her paint-stained jeans to her messy hair, taking in every detail of her disheveled appearance. He set down his papers and gave her a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "I see," he said slowly. "Well, the Grand Wellington caters to a very specific clientele. Our ballroom rental starts at $50,000, and that's just for the space. Catering, decorations, and other services would be additional." "That's fine," Lisa replied. "We have a substantial budget for the event. Could I possibly see the ballroom and discuss the details?" Richard laughed, actually laughed, and Lisa felt her cheeks begin to burn. A couple walking through the lobby turned to look at them. "Ma'am, I don't think you understand what kind of establishment this is," he said, his voice dripping with condescension. "Perhaps you'd be more comfortable with a hotel that's more suited to your budget. There's a Holiday Inn about 3 miles down the road. Or maybe the community center you work at has a space you could use." Lisa blinked, stunned by his rudeness. "I appreciate your concern, but I assure you budget isn't an issue. I just want to see the facilities and discuss our needs." Richard leaned forward slightly, lowering his voice but somehow making it even more insulting. "Listen, I've been in this business for 15 years. I can tell when someone is wasting my time. You come in here looking like you've been digging through dumpsters, and you expect me to believe you're planning some high-end charity event? Do you have any idea how many people try to walk through these doors every day thinking they can afford our services?" Lisa's hands were shaking now, but she kept her voice steady. "I understand how I look. I've been volunteering all day, and I came straight here because this was the only time I had available. If you would just—" "No," Richard cut her off, his voice sharp. "I don't have time for this. I have real clients to attend to, people who actually belong here. I'm going to have to ask you to leave." The lobby had gone quiet. Other guests were staring now, and Lisa could feel the weight of their judgment. A woman in a fur coat whispered something to her companion, and they both looked at Lisa with a mixture of pity and disgust. "This is ridiculous," Lisa said, trying one more time. "I'm simply asking to see your event spaces. I'm not asking for charity. I'm a potential customer." Richard straightened up to his full height, clearly enjoying his position of power. "Security," he called out, and Lisa's heart sank. A uniformed security guard began walking toward them. "That won't be necessary," Lisa said quickly, her voice tight with emotion. "I'll leave." I think that would be best, Richard replied smugly. And next time, maybe think about whether a place is appropriate for you before you walk in. Not everyone can afford the Grand Wellington, and there's no shame in that. But there is shame in pretending to be something you're not. Lisa felt tears prickling at the corners of her eyes, but she refused to let them fall. Not here, not in front of these people. She turned and walked toward the exit, her head held high despite the humiliation burning through her chest. Behind her, she could hear Richard saying something to another staff member, and they both laughed. The doorman didn't move to open the door for her on the way out. She had to push it open herself, stepping out into the cool evening air. Her car sat in the parking lot exactly where she'd left it, a reminder of how little had changed in the last 15 minutes and how much had changed at the same time. She sat in the driver's seat for a long moment, just breathing. Her phone buzzed with a text from David, her assistant at the foundation. "How did it go at the hotel?" It read. Lisa stared at the message, unsure how to respond. How did she explain what had just happened? How did she put into words the casual cruelty? The assumption that her appearance meant she was worthless? The complete dismissal of her dignity as a human being? She thought about the kids she'd spent the day with. Kids who faced this kind of judgment every single day just because of where they lived or what their parents could afford. Kids who were told in 1,000 subtle and not-so-subtle ways that they didn't belong in certain spaces, that they weren't good enough, that they should know their place. This was exactly why her foundation existed. This was exactly the kind of prejudice they fought against. And here she was, running an organization dedicated to human dignity and equality. And she'd just been treated like she was invisible, like she was nothing. The irony wasn't lost on her. Lisa started the car and pulled out of the parking lot, glancing one more time at the gleaming facade of the Grand Wellington Hotel in her rearview mirror. Something had shifted inside her during that humiliating encounter. She'd walked into that hotel hoping to book a venue. She was leaving with something else entirely, a burning determination to teach someone a lesson they'd never forget. Tomorrow, she thought, things would be very different. Tomorrow, Richard Thornton would learn that you should never judge a book by its cover. Tomorrow, she would return to the Grand Wellington Hotel, but it wouldn't be in her old Honda and it wouldn't be in paint-stained jeans. Tomorrow, they would see exactly who they'd turned away. Lisa drove home in silence, her mind replaying every moment of the encounter at the Grand Wellington. The more she thought about it, the angrier she became. Not the hot, explosive kind of anger, but something colder and more calculating. She'd been underestimated her entire life, and usually she let it roll off her back. But this time felt different. This time, someone needed to learn that dignity wasn't something you earned with expensive clothes or a fancy car. Her apartment was small but cozy, filled with books and photos from her volunteer work over the years. She kicked off her dirty sneakers by the door and went straight to the kitchen, pouring herself a glass of water. Her phone rang just as she sat down at the kitchen table. "David," she answered, recognizing her assistant's number. "Finally, I've been waiting to hear from you. How's the Grand Wellington? Did they have availability for the gala?" Lisa was quiet for a moment, trying to decide how much to tell him. David had been working with her at the Chen Foundation for 3 years now. He knew how she operated, how she preferred to stay out of the spotlight, how she'd rather spend money on programs than on herself. "They weren't interested in our business," she finally said. There was a pause on the other end. "What do you mean they weren't interested?" "We're talking about a $500,000 event. What hotel turns that down?" "One that judges people by their appearance," Lisa replied, her voice flat. She proceeded to tell him everything, from Richard's dismissive attitude to the humiliating walk out of the lobby, while other guests stared and whispered. David was silent for so long that Lisa thought the call had dropped. Then he spoke and his voice was tight with anger. "Are you kidding me? Do they have any idea who you are? The Chen Foundation has been featured in Forbes, for crying out loud. You were named Philanthropist of the Year by the State Foundation Association." "They didn't ask," Lisa said simply, "and I wasn't about to pull out my cretin. Tials to prove my worth to someone who'd already decided I wasn't worth their time. So what are we going to do? Please tell me we're not booking the gala there." Lisa smiled for the first time since leaving the hotel. "Actually, I'm thinking we might—" "Wait, what?" "But first I'm going back tomorrow. And this time I'm going to look the part they expect." David was quiet again, but she could practically hear the gears turning in his head. "Oh," he said slowly, Oh, this is going to be good, isn't it? I need you to arrange a few things for me, Lisa said, standing up and walking to her bedroom. She opened her closet, pushing past the casual clothes she usually wore. In the back, protected by garment bags, hung the few designer outfits she owned. Gifts from her mother before she passed, clothes that Lisa had never felt comfortable wearing because they seemed too extravagant, too showy. Her mother's voice echoed in her memory. Sometimes, Lisa, you have to play the game to change the rules. What do you need? David asked, already sounding excited. Call Premium Limousine Services. Book their best car for tomorrow evening, 6 o'clock pickup from my apartment. Then call that salon on 5th Avenue, the fancy one. Book me for a full styling appointment at 2. Hair, makeup, everything. This is amazing, David said. What else? Pull together our foundation portfolio. The nice leather one with all our programs, our financial statements, our board members, everything. And David, make sure to include the photos from today at the community center. The kids' smiling faces, the art projects, all of it. I want them to see exactly what they dismissed. They talked for another 20 minutes, finalizing the details. After hanging up, Lisa sat on her bed looking at the dress she'd pulled from the garment bag. It was a deep navy blue, elegant and expensive. Her mother had bought it for her 5 years ago, insisting that Lisa needed at least one outfit that reflected the foundation's success. Lisa had worn it exactly once to her mother's funeral. She thought about her parents and how they'd built the Chen Foundation from nothing. Her father had been a restaurant owner, her mother a teacher. They'd worked hard, saved every penny they could, and invested wisely. When they died in a car accident 8 years ago, they'd left Lisa not only their financial success but also their life's mission: to help people who were overlooked, underestimated, and underserved by society. Lisa had inherited nearly $20 million, along with the responsibility of the foundation. Most people in her position would have bought a mansion, driven expensive cars, worn designer clothes every day. But Lisa had watched her parents live modestly despite their wealth, and she'd adopted the same philosophy. Why spend money on luxuries when that money could send kids to college, provide meals for hungry families, or fund art programs for children who'd never held a paintbrush? The board members often disagreed with her approach. They argued that to attract major donors, the foundation needed to look successful. They said her modest lifestyle made people question whether the foundation was legitimate. But Lisa had always believed that their work should speak for itself, until today. Today had shown her that sometimes appearances did matter. Not because they should, but because people made them matter. And if she wanted to teach Richard Thornton a lesson about judging people, she'd have to use his own prejudices against him. She spent the evening preparing. She read through the foundation's latest annual report, memorizing statistics about the families they'd helped, the programs they'd funded, the lives they'd changed. She practiced what she would say, how she would reveal herself, how she would make her point without being cruel. Because that was important to her. She didn't want revenge. She wanted education. She wanted Richard to understand what he'd done wrong, to feel the weight of his prejudice and hopefully to change. The next morning, Lisa woke up early and went for a run, trying to calm her nerves. She kept thinking about the kids at the community center, about how they faced this kind of discrimination constantly. Little Marcus, whose teacher assumed he was a troublemaker just because of where he lived. Or young Sophie, who was told she couldn't be in the advanced reading group because kids from her neighborhood usually struggled. These children dealt with judgment and prejudice every day, and they didn't have the luxury of a dramatic reveal to prove their worth. This wasn't just about her humiliation yesterday. This was about everyone who'd ever been dismissed because they didn't look the part. The salon appointment was surreal. The stylist, a woman named Patricia, seemed confused when Lisa first walked in wearing jeans and a simple t-shirt. "I have an appointment," Lisa explained. "Full styling booked under David Chen's name." Patricia's confusion turned to professional efficiency. "Of course, let's get started. What's the occasion?" "Business meeting," Lisa said simply, settling into the chair. "I need to make an impression." 3 hours later, Lisa barely recognized herself in the mirror. Her normally simple, straight hair had been transformed into soft waves that framed her face perfectly. Her makeup was subtle but flawless, enhancing her features without looking overdone. Patricia had even helped her pick out which jewelry to wear with the navy dress. "You look stunning," Patricia said, beaming with pride at her work. "Whoever you're meeting with is going to be blown away." "That's the plan. Lisa replied, smiling. Back at her apartment, she dressed carefully, taking her time with every detail. The navy dress fit perfectly elegant and professional. She added the pearl necklace her mother had given her, simple pearl earrings, and her mother's watch. She slipped on black heels that made her 3 inches taller, and practiced walking in them around her apartment. At exactly 6 o'clock, her phone buzzed. David was outside with the limousine. She grabbed the leather portfolio he'd prepared and took one last look in the mirror. The woman staring back at her looked confident, successful, and powerful. She looked like someone who belonged at the Grand Wellington Hotel. But as Lisa headed down to the waiting car, she caught sight of the photo on her entryway table. It was from yesterday, taken at the community center. She was kneeling on the floor, covered in paint, surrounded by laughing children. That woman in the photo, the one with messy hair and stained clothes, was the real Lisa Chen. That was who she was proud to be. What she was about to do wasn't about pretending to be someone else. It was about showing that the woman in both photos was the same person, deserving of the same respect regardless of what she was wearing. David opened the limousine door and his jaw dropped. "Wow, Lisa, you look incredible." "Thanks," she said, sliding into the back seat. The interior was all leather and polished wood with a mini bar and soft lighting. It was ridiculous and over the top, exactly what she needed. As they drove toward the Grand Wellington, Lisa felt her heartbeat quicken. 24 hours ago, she'd been humiliated in that lobby. In just a few minutes, she'd walk back through those doors and everything would be different. David handed her the portfolio. "Everything's in there?" "Financial statements showing our annual budget, photos of our programs, letters from the families we've helped, board member credentials, and the proposal for the gala." Lisa flipped through it, impressed as always by David's thoroughness. The numbers told a powerful story. $10 million donated to various causes last year, 5,000 families directly helped, 20 scholarship recipients, 3 new community centers funded. "You ready for this?" David asked as they pulled into the Grand Wellington circular driveway. Lisa watched as the same doorman who'd ignored her yesterday rushed to open the limousine door, his face eager and obsequious. She took a deep breath. "Yes," she said. "I'm ready." The doorman practically tripped over himself rushing to open the limousine door. His white-gloved hand extended toward Lisa, and she accepted it gracefully, stepping out onto the red carpet that led to the hotel entrance. The same man who had looked through her like she was invisible yesterday now beamed at her with the brightest smile. "Welcome to the Grand Wellington Hotel." "Ma'am," he said, his voice warm and respectful. "Will you be checking in with us this evening?" Lisa simply smiled. "I have a meeting with your general manager." "Of course. Please, right this way." He rushed ahead to hold open the gleaming glass door, practically bowing as she walked through. The lobby looked exactly the same as yesterday, all crystal and marble in perfect polish. But this time, instead of feeling out of place, Lisa watched as heads turned in her direction. A couple sitting in the lobby lounge area looked up from their cocktails. A businessman pausing at the concierge desk did a double take. Even the staff members scattered around the lobby seemed to straighten up slightly, their expressions shifting to attentive professionalism. David walked beside her, carrying the portfolio, looking every bit the professional assistant in his tailored suit. They made quite a picture, she realized. Exactly the kind of picture the Grand Wellington expected. And there, behind the front desk, was Richard Thornton. He was helping an elderly woman with her room key, but his eyes flicked toward the entrance when the doorman ushered Lisa inside. She saw his gaze travel over her, taking in the designer dress, the professional styling, the obvious wealth. His expression shifted into that same eager hospitality he'd probably used 1,000 times before. Lisa walked toward the front desk, her heels clicking confidently on the floor. She kept her expression neutral, pleasant but not overly friendly. Richard finished with his customer and immediately turned his attention to her, that practiced smile spreading across his face. "Good evening. And welcome to the Grand Wellington," he said smoothly, his voice dripping with the kind of warmth he definitely hadn't shown her yesterday. "How may I assist you this evening?" Lisa looked directly into his eyes, watching for any sign of recognition. There was none. In his mind, yesterday's woman in paint-stained jeans and today's elegant businesswoman were two completely different people. The realization made her stomach turn. "Yes, hello," she said, keeping her voice professional. I have an appointment with your general manager, Helen Prescott. I'm here to discuss hosting a significant event at your hotel. Wonderful. Richard's smile grew even wider. Ms. Prescott is expecting you, I believe. May I have your name? Lisa Chen, with the Chen Foundation. She watched carefully, but the name clearly meant nothing to him in connection with yesterday's encounter. He typed something into his computer, then nodded enthusiastically. Yes, here we are. Ms. Prescott will be right down. Please, would you like to have a seat in our lounge while you wait? Can I offer you some refreshment? Coffee, tea, perhaps some champagne? Water would be fine, thank you, Lisa replied, allowing him to guide her toward the plush seating area. The same seating area where yesterday, people had stared at her with disdain. Richard snapped his fingers at a nearby server. Water for Ms. Chen immediately. Then, turning back to Lisa, he continued in that smooth, practiced tone. The Chen Foundation, you said? I'm not familiar with it, but I'd love to learn more. We pride ourselves on hosting prestigious events here at the Grand Wellington. I'm sure you do, Lisa said softly, settling into one of the velvet chairs. David sat beside her, placing the portfolio on the coffee table. You know, Richard continued, clearly trying to make conversation while they waited. We hosted Senator Richardson's campaign fundraiser last month, and before that, the Thompson-Wallace wedding. Perhaps you saw the photos in Style magazine. It was a $200,000 affair, absolutely stunning. Impressive, Lisa said, her tone neutral. She was fascinated by how differently he treated her now. Every word, every gesture, every smile was designed to make her feel valued, important, worthy of his time. The contrast with yesterday was staggering. The server returned with a crystal glass of water on a silver tray, complete with a lemon slice and a small napkin. Richard watched to make sure everything was perfect, then continued his pitch. The Grand Wellington has been rated the #1 luxury hotel in the state for 3 consecutive years. We have 5 ballrooms, the largest accommodating up to 500 guests. Our executive chef trained in Paris and has received numerous culinary awards. Whatever your event needs, I can assure you we have the expertise and elegance to exceed your expectations. Yesterday, this same man had told her to try the Holiday Inn down the road. Tell me, Mr. Thornton, Lisa said, her eyes meeting his directly, what makes the Grand Wellington different from other luxury hotels in the area? He leaned forward slightly, clearly warming to the topic. Excellent question. What sets us apart is our attention to detail and our commitment to excellence. But more than that, it's our understanding of clientele. We know our guests. We understand what they need, what they expect, and we deliver. We're very selective about the events we host here because we believe in maintaining a certain standard. Selective, Lisa repeated. Interesting word. Indeed, Richard agreed, missing her tone entirely. We find that quality is better than quantity. Not every event is right for the Grand Wellington, and not every client is a good fit for our brand. We've learned over the years to identify the right partnerships. And how exactly do you identify the right partnerships? Lisa asked, her voice still pleasant but with an edge that David recognized. She saw him shift slightly in his seat, preparing for what was coming. Well, it's a combination of factors, Richard said, clearly proud to share his expertise. Budget, of course. Vision. But also, and this might sound old-fashioned, but we believe in a certain level of refinement. We can usually tell within the first few minutes of meeting someone whether they understand what the Grand Wellington represents. Within the first few minutes, Lisa echoed. Based on what exactly? Richard seemed to sense something in her tone and adjusted his approach slightly. Based on their presentation, their professionalism, their understanding of luxury hospitality. For example, when you walked in this evening, I could immediately tell that you understand quality, the way you carry yourself, your attention to detail. These things matter in our world. Before Lisa could respond, a woman in an impeccable black suit emerged from the elevator bay and walked toward them with a confident stride. She had silver hair cut in a sharp bob, and the kind of presence that commanded attention without demanding it. Ms. Chen, she asked, extending her hand as she approached. I'm Helen Prescott, General Manager of the Grand Wellington. It's a pleasure to meet you. Lisa stood and shook her hand. The pleasure is mine. This is my assistant, David. Helen shook David's hand as well, then gestured toward Richard. I see you've met our guest relations manager, Richard Thornton. He's been with us for 15 years and knows this hotel inside and out. Oh, we've gotten acquainted, Lisa said, her smile not quite reaching her eyes. Mr. Thornton has been very informative about the Grand Wellington standards and how you identify the right clientele. Richard is excellent at reading people, Helen said warmly, clearly proud of her staff. Now shall we head to my office to discuss your event? Or would you prefer to tour our facilities first? Actually, Lisa said, settling back into her chair, there's something I'd like to discuss right here first, if you don't mind. Helen looked slightly surprised but accommodating. Of course. Please go ahead. Lisa took a sip of her water, taking her time. Richard remained standing nearby, clearly pleased that he'd made such a good impression on this important potential client. The lobby continued its quiet bustle around them, other guests coming and going, staff members efficiently attending to various tasks. Yesterday, Lisa began, her voice calm and clear, a woman walked into this hotel. She'd spent all day volunteering at a community center, working with underprivileged children on an art project. She was tired, her clothes were stained with paint, and she probably looked like she'd been through quite a day. Are you following me so far? Helen nodded, though a small line had appeared between her eyebrows. Richard's smile had frozen on his face. This woman approached the front desk, Lisa continued, and asked about booking your ballroom for a charity gala. She explained that she had a budget for the event and wanted to see the facilities, but she never got that chance. The color was starting to drain from Richard's face. Lisa watched as the realization began to dawn on him, slowly at first, then all at once. The guest relations manager took one look at her appearance and decided she wasn't worth his time. He laughed at her. He suggested she try the Holiday Inn down the road. He called security and had her escorted out of the building while other guests stared and whispered. He told her that she should know her place, that not everyone can afford the Grand Wellington. Helen's expression had shifted from confused to horrified. Ms. Chen, I'm not sure I understand what you're... That woman was me, Lisa said quietly, her eyes locked on Richard's face. Yesterday I was that woman, and today I'm still the same person. The only thing that's changed is my clothes. The lobby seemed to go very quiet, though it might have just been Lisa's perception. Richard had gone pale, his mouth opening and closing like a fish out of water. Helen looked between Lisa and Richard, her professional composure cracking to show genuine shock. I didn't, Richard stammered. Yesterday I didn't realize what? Lisa asked, her voice sharp now. Didn't realize I had money? Didn't realize I ran a foundation? Or didn't realize that I was a human being who deserved basic respect regardless of what I was wearing? David pulled out the portfolio and opened it on the coffee table, revealing the financial statements on top. The Chen Foundation manages $20 million in assets, he said calmly. Last year alone, we donated $10 million to various charitable causes. We're planning a gala with an estimated budget of $500,000. Helen picked up the portfolio with shaking hands, flipping through the pages. Lisa watched as the general manager's face went from shock to something that looked like fury as she read through the details of what the hotel had turned away. Helen, Prescott's hands were trembling as she set down the portfolio. Her face had gone from professional composure to barely contained fury in the span of 30 seconds. She turned to Richard, who looked like he wanted the marble floor to open up and swallow him whole. Is this true? Helen asked, her voice dangerously quiet. Did you refuse service to Ms. Chen yesterday? Richard's mouth opened and closed several times before any words came out. There was a misunderstanding. The woman who came in yesterday, she wasn't dressed. She wasn't dressed like she had money, Lisa finished for him, her voice steady. So you assumed she was wasting your time. You assumed she couldn't afford the Grand Welly. Nanton. And based on that assumption, you humiliated her in front of your other guests. Mr. Thornton, Helen said, each word clipped and precise. In my office now. Wait, Lisa said, holding up her hand. Please, I'd prefer to handle this here if you don't mind. Helen looked at her, confusion replacing some of the anger. Ms. Chen, I assure you that this behavior is completely unacceptable and will be dealt with. I am profoundly sorry for... I know you are, Lisa interrupted gently. And I appreciate that, but I didn't come back here today just to embarrass Mr. Thornton or to get him fired. I came back because I wanted him, and honestly, I wanted you too to understand something important. The lobby had gone quiet around them. Other guests had noticed the tension at the seating area, and several staff members had paused in their duties, sensing that something significant was happening. Lisa could feel their eyes on her, but she kept her attention focused on Richard and Helen. "Do you know what the Chen Foundation does?" Lisa asked, looking between them. "Our mission is to provide opportunities and dignity to people who are often overlooked by society. We fund education programs for low-income students. We support community centers in underserved neighborhoods. We provide job training for formerly incarcerated individuals trying to rebuild their lives. We help homeless families find housing. Every single person we work with has been judged, dismissed, or underestimated at some point in their lives, usually because of their appearance, their zip code, or their circumstances." She pulled out a photo from the portfolio, one that David had included from yesterday's art project. It showed her kneeling on the floor, paint-stained and messy, surrounded by a group of children with huge smiles on their faces. "This is who I am," Lisa said, holding up the photo. This woman, covered in paint, working with kids who society often writes off before they even get a chance. That's not a disguise or a phase. That's my life's work. And yesterday, when I walked into your hotel looking like this, Mr. Thornton decided I wasn't worth even 5 minutes of his time." Richard had tears in his eyes now. "Ms. Chen, I am so sorry. I made a terrible mistake. I was busy, and I made assumptions, and I was wrong. Please, You were busy," Lisa repeated. "That's interesting, because when I walked in today dressed like this, you had all the time in the world for me. You offered me champagne. You told me about your prestigious events. You explained your philosophy about understanding clientele and maintaining standards. The difference between yesterday and today wasn't your schedule, Mr. Thornton. It was your prejudice." Helen sank into one of the chairs, still holding the portfolio. "Ms. Chen, I don't know what to say. This is not who we are as an organization. This is not what the Grand Wellington stands for." "Isn't it, though?" Lisa asked, not unkindly. "Because Mr. Thornton didn't invent his attitudes in a vacuum. He's worked here for 15 years, you said. Which means for 15 years he's been making these judgments, treating people differently based on their appearance. And until today, until it cost you a $500,000 contract, no one noticed or cared." Helen looked stricken. "If we had known..." "But you didn't know because the people he dismissed didn't have the resources to come back in a limousine and make their point," Lisa said. "They didn't have a foundation or a portfolio of accomplishments to prove their worth. They just absorbed the humiliation and moved on, probably telling themselves that they didn't belong in places like this anyway." She turned back to Richard, who was now openly crying, tears streaming down his face. Several staff members had gathered at a respectful distance, watching the scene unfold. The hotel's perfect, polished atmosphere had been shattered, replaced by something raw and real. "Do you understand what you did yesterday?" Lisa asked him directly. "I'm not talking about losing business or making a mistake. Do you understand the human impact of your actions?" Richard nodded, wiping his eyes with the back of his hand. "I do. God, I do. I made you feel small. I made you feel like you didn't matter. I judged you based on your clothes instead of treating you like a person who deserved respect." "And how many other people have you treated that way?" Lisa pressed. "How many other Lisas walked through those doors hoping for a chance only to be dismissed because they didn't look the part?" "I don't know," Richard whispered. "Too many. Way too many." Helen stood up, her professional composure beginning to return, though her face was still pale. "Ms. Chen, you would be well within your rights to report this incident to the Better Business Bureau, to share your experience on social media, to ensure that this hotel suffers consequences for what happened to you. Instead, you came back here to make a point. I respect that more than I can express. What can we do to make this right?" Lisa was quiet for a moment, considering. This was the moment she'd been planning for, the reason she'd gone through all this effort. She could take her business elsewhere. She could destroy the hotel's reputation with a few well-placed reviews. She could get Richard fired, but none of those things would actually change anything. They wouldn't address the root problem. They wouldn't help the next person who walked through those doors looking wrong. "I have a proposal," Lisa said finally. "But I need you both to hear me out completely before you respond." "Of course," Helen said immediately. "Anything." Lisa gestured for everyone to sit. Even Richard, though he looked like he'd rather be anywhere else on earth, sank into one of the chairs. David pulled out a notebook, ready to take notes. "I will book the gala at the Grand Wellington," Lisa began, and she saw Richard's head snap up in surprise. "It's a prestigious venue, and despite yesterday's experience, I think it could work well for our event. But I have conditions." "Name them," Helen said firmly. First, I want Mr. Thornton to participate in a program I'm going to design specifically for this situation. He'll spend one full day volunteering at the Riverside Community Center, dressed in regular clothes, working with the kids I work with. He'll experience firsthand what it's like to be on the other side of judgment and assumptions. Richard nodded immediately. I'll do it absolutely. Second, Lisa continued, the Grand Wellington will implement mandatory training for all staff on dignity, respect, and unconscious bias. Not just a 1-hour video they can sleep through. Real training with real examples with accountability. Helen was already pulling out her phone to take notes. Done. I'll have our HR director start developing the program immediately, and I'd like your input on the curriculum if you're willing to provide it. Third, Lisa said, the hotel will partner with the Chen Foundation for this gala. Instead of just renting us the space, I want the Grand Wellington to become a sponsor. I want your staff to meet the people we serve, to understand the work we do, to see the faces of the families and children who benefit from our programs. We would be honored, Helen said, and Lisa could see that she meant it. And finally, Lisa said, looking directly at Richard, I don't want you fired. Both Richard and Helen looked shocked. Richard actually gasped. Ms. Chen, I appreciate your generosity, but I'm not sure that's... Helen began. Let me finish, Lisa said. I don't want him fired because firing him would be easy. It would make the problem disappear from your hotel, but it wouldn't solve anything. Richard would just go work somewhere else, maybe learn to hide his prejudices better, but not actually change. What I want is for him to genuinely understand what he did wrong and become better because of it. Richard was crying again, but this time it was different. I don't deserve this, he said, his voice breaking. I don't deserve your kindness or your forgiveness. What I did was cruel and unforgivable. Maybe, Lisa agreed, but I've spent my entire career believing that people can change, that they can learn and grow and become better versions of themselves. If I don't extend that belief to you, then what am I even doing with my foundation? What message am I sending? She pulled out another photo from the portfolio, this one showing a teenage boy receiving a scholarship check. This young man was told by his school counselor that college wasn't for him, that he should focus on vocational training instead. The counselor made that judgment based on his zip code and his family's income. He's now studying engineering at State University on a full scholarship from our foundation. His name is Kevin and he wants to design bridges. She set down another photo, this one of a woman in her 40s standing in front of a small bakery. This is Patricia. She spent 5 years in prison for a mistake she made when she was young. When she got out, no one would give her a chance. Our foundation helped her get training and secure a small business loan. She now owns a bakery that employs 6 people, 3 of them formerly incarcerated women just like her. One by one, Lisa laid out photos on the coffee table, a mother and her children in front of their new apartment, an elderly man at a computer training class, a group of teenagers in gray graduation caps and gowns. Each photo represented a person who had been dismissed, judged, or underestimated, and who had been given a chance to prove their worth. Every single one of these people was somebody's Richard moment, Lisa said quietly. Somebody decided they weren't worth the time, the investment, the respect. Somebody looked at them and saw only their circumstances, not their potential, and every single one of them deserved better than that judgment. The silence in the lobby was profound. Even the guests who had been pretending not to watch had given up the pretense and were openly listening now. Lisa could see tears on several faces, staff and guests alike. So here's what I'm proposing, Lisa continued. Richard stays. He completes the volunteer program. He participates fully in the training. And he becomes the face of this hotel's commitment to treating every person who walks through those doors with dignity and respect, regardless of what they're wearing or driving or how they look. She turned to Richard directly. Can you do that? Can you take this horrible mistake and turn it into something that matters? Can you become the person who ensures no one else ever feels the way I felt yesterday? Richard nodded, unable to speak for a moment. When he finally found his voice, it was raw with emotion. I can. I will. Ms. Chen, I promise you I will spend the rest of my career making up for what I did to you. Helen stood up, extending her hand to Lisa. You are an extraordinary person. Ms. Chen, the Grand Wellington would be privileged to host your gala and to partner with the Chen Foundation, and I give you my personal commitment that we will implement every single one of your conditions, starting today. Lisa shook her hand. then surprised everyone by extending her hand to Richard as well. He looked at it for a moment as if he couldn't believe she was offering it, then shook it firmly. "Thank you," he whispered. "Thank you for giving me a chance to be better."